In Romans 6:12-14, we explore how to live in daily victory in Christ. Quote, "Therefore, do not let sin reign in your mortal body, that you should obey its lusts. And do not go on presenting the members of your body to sin as instruments of unrighteousness, but present yourselves to God as those alive from the dead, and your members as instruments of righteousness to God. For sin shall not be master over you, for you are not under law, but under grace." You know, in Romans 6:12-14, two things stand out. First, Paul's commands leap out at us. One in verse 12 and two in verse 13. You know, we've gone from having no commands in all of 1:1 to 6:10 to that first command in 6:11 to three commands in 3 verses in 6:12-14. Clearly, this passage is about applying the great theology we've been learning. Second, Paul mentions our old nemesis of sin in each of these 3 verses. So Paul is commanding us to manhandle sin in our lives. We now have the power to choose what to do about sin, and we are commanded to break the rule of sin in our lives. You know, this is remarkable in light of the horror of Romans 1:18-3:20, where man's great problem of sin was so powerful, we were left speechless in the courtroom of God, utterly destitute and without hope, flattened under the influence of sin. Then, at the cross of Christ, the power of sin and death was broken. We are now united with Christ by faith, having His life and His power implanted into us. So we now have the power to break the rule of sin in 3 ways. 1, by choosing to obey sin no longer. 2, by presenting ourselves completely to God. And 3, by living under grace. Now, the key to this is living by a different life principle than the old principle of sin and death. We begin each day simply thanking Him for His power to defeat sin that day, all day long. We begin each day from a position of victory over sin, with Christ's power over sin becoming our power over sin. Then we present ourselves to God right away in the morning, asking Him to live out His life through us that day, all day, that He might take our ordinary day and make it extraordinary with His life. You know, we are on an adventure with Him, and it is all about Him and what He is doing, not just about sin and staying out of trouble. And when we slip up and fall at various points through the day, we just return to Him and ask Him by His grace to pick us up again and walk with Him in newness of life. You know, this is life by a different principle, life under grace, life by His power. Like a plane taking off as the forces of thrust and lift overcome the old forces of drag and gravity that weigh us down, and thus we fly.